former Bexar County DA Nico LaHood, trial lawyer, managing partner of the LaHood Norton Law Group, and George Araujo, scholar, former chemist, pharmaceutical researcher, and director. Good morning, guys. This week there have been many topics that we've been tossing around, and one that I don't understand, but I want to talk about, and I hope this is on the list that made it to what we're going to be discussing today, is that Fox News settlement defamation lawsuit with Dominion Voting Systems. Because if a journalism group, if that's what Fox News is, has to pay because they reported on something, how is it that they would lose in a lawsuit? And maybe, is that one of the topics we're going to talk about?
Well, so it's one on the list. I mean, we need to talk about that. The First Amendment right that doesn't cover defamation. And so the claim was defamation. Now, you have to think, when someone brings a lawsuit for defamation, then, I mean, and under defamation, you have libel and slander. Slander is when you speak about it. Libel is when you write about it. I guess it's both when you're a news agency. Well, defamation is not covered by the First Amendment. There's certain things. I mean, I'm a pretty close to a First Amendment absolutist. I mean, I believe in, hurtful speech. You can do it if you want to. I don't advise it, but you should have the freedom to do it. You give your opinion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. Even some speech that some people might think is hateful, but other people don't. I mean, people have criticized me, and I'm all for free speech. Within limits, right? You can't yell fire in a movie theater, and you can't yell, yeah, shoot them, and stuff like that. I get that. But defamation is not covered. So the defense to defamation is the truth. So if someone says, you're defaming me, yeah, but what I said was true, so go away with your BS lawsuit. Well, that's the truth. So I don't know the details of this. I know there was some depositions taken. There's a high standard. There's a New York Times versus Sullivan case that sets the standard of actual malice that has to be proven. And then you say, well, what is actual malice? There's a definition for it, of course, but proven it's another story. Knowledge of falsity. Okay, that would be actual malice or reckless disregard for the truth. So I knew it was false, and I said it earlier, or I'm pretty sure I knew it was false, and I said it anyway. Both of those would be examples of actual malice. And they're usually established through discovery and depositions. And look, I mean, we can dive into why we think, Fox News settled out. I guess it's the same reason why CNN settled out on the Covington kid situation. This is just more because it was a bigger lawsuit, $1.6 billion. So you're working with bigger numbers. And, so it's fascinating, but I mean, I have my opinions, but we can talk it through if you want to, Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the actual malice thing too. That's my question. Yeah. Typically, what is that? A reckless disregard for the truth.
Right. Or a falsity, a knowledge of falsity, yeah.
So basically, the First Amendment protects your right to say stupid things and your right to say offensive things. It does not protect against your right to willingly deceive.
Right.
Okay. So, and I think if that's the basis, then that's a pretty tall hurdle. That's a substantial burden on Dominion, demonstrating that Fox then was guilty of actual malice or a reckless disregard for the truth. And so what I asked Nico last night, because we were talking about this, is that the judge denied basically that Fox had a constitutional right to challenge Dominion and their claims. And they basically sort of entered up front, or the judge did, that Fox had lied. And I thought that was bizarre. It seems to me that the judge, I'm surprised that this didn't get called into question by the judge, because it's such a tall order. And that was troubling to me. But okay, fine. So it went forward. And why is it that Fox thought that they couldn't win this thing before a jury? Because I think they could have.
Well, I don't know if they could have. I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, because what?
I'll tell you why. I think they could have.
So then let's say, okay, I'm curious about that one. But let's say, okay, so they say the defense to defamation is the truth. So what's the truth that they had on their show?
We're too far down the line here. and you and I chatted about this, and this is what I think, Nico, should have been discussed before a jury, and I think they could have won this because I watch Fox pretty avidly. Mm-hmm. So what I found from Fox was a rather tepid defense of the Trump claims that there was fraud in the 2020 election, much less widespread fraud. There was nothing on the Fox News anchor team that supported that. In fact, if you look at Bret Baier, even guys like Brit Hume, Martha McCallum, they were avidly and staunchly against that narrative. I don't know anyone on the actual news side of that network, and I've looked to find particulars, like anything that I may have missed. If somebody who's listening can send something in, that disagrees with what I'm saying, I'd be happy to learn. But there's nothing on the news side, Nico, where they actually came out and said that they believed. They did not believe Trump's narrative, but they were parroting on nightly news. What we saw was on the editorial side, from Hannity, maybe Tucker, and others, maybe Lou Dobbs. We saw a bunch of individuals saying, yes, in fact, that what Trump's saying is fraudulent, and then maybe behind the scenes there were some doubts and some emails were exchanged. So what? You're allowed to do that on the editorial board. You're allowed to do that. It's called editorial. It's not news. So I don't understand. I frankly, what am I missing?
That was a Fox. Well, maybe there's a lot of information that we don't know about this. Okay, there was depositions. Murdoch, I heard, said again. I didn't see the deposition myself. Said like, oh, we were just going for ratings. Well, that could be a conscious disregard. And then for them to defend it, that means they're going to haul Hannity in.
That's exactly my point.
Murdoch's going to get on the stand. It's going to be a frenzy, and they're thinking of their ultimate goodwill of their organization. And moving on.
Just pay it off. Yeah, let's go.
But let's play that out.
I think it was a business decision.
I think you're right. I think so. Hannity would come on board and said, "Look, I actually believe that," and so I was stating that, and it's my right, my First Amendment right to state that. I'm not a journalist. I'm an editorialist. And then somebody could say, "Yeah, but we found emails in the background between you and Tucker and others, maybe that show that you actually had some doubts about this." Yeah, that's called thinking. That's called deliberating. That's called, working through a fact pattern. So what?
You get the wrong jury. Forget about 1.6 billion. They could have had punitives attached on too.
And where would the jury be?
But what about the goodwill? I mean, you're going to drag Tucker in and Hannity and Murdoch and anybody else that they think is relevant. You get a judge making a bad ruling, and then you bring more people on. I mean, it gets bloody. And so I don't know. I'm not sure. Look, I saw that someone sent me that interview with Don Lemon and what's his face, Vivek, whatever his name is. That presidential candidate, who seems like a sharp, nice guy.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, that guy. And so it was like, oh, this is different. We never did that. I mean, the hypocrisy is over the charts. I thought he did a fairly decent job on that interview, pushing back. But CNN did the same. I mean, the CNN settled out too. It was just a smaller amount because the Covington young man didn't sue as much as Dominion did. So we're just dealing with different numbers. This is the biggest settlement ever settled out. Well, because the lawsuit was for a bigger amount. This is still a proportion of that. It was less than half of what the lawsuit was trying to collect. So they made a business decision. I don't know if they thought they were wrong or not right. I don't know what all the depositions showed. I don't know what the discovery showed on the request for disclosures and production and all the stuff that happens during civil discovery. But they made the decision they made.
A couple of other topics that I hope that we get a chance to discuss is the one that is just looming, and we've talked a little bit about it, but Trump DeSantis, is Biden going to run? I mean, can we just touch on that a little bit? Because it seems in the polls that Trump is alone in this, and that DeSantis is just a far away second person. I don't even want to know.
Governor DeSantis, who, I'm a big fan of, and I've been very vocal about that, seems to have really lost steam. I mean, you talk about fast overnight. He's just kind of puttered out, and I don't know if that's advice. He's kind of testing the waters outside of his comfort of Florida. I mean, he's in his groove in Florida when he's talking about Floridian issues. He's in his groove, and I don't know. His book didn't really explode the way I guess they did. I don't know if marketing people, publicists, I don't know. I'm not going to act like Monday morning quarterback. It's interesting to see the polls and where he's at and where he's not at. And then think about what we're up against. We're up against insanity on the left, and we're going to talk about that sports bill, I think today too, about that vote in the House and how it was just a party line vote, and now the lines are strictly, I mean, they're just blatantly clear now of what each party feels on this issue. But I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to see that, how DeSantis has just lost all steam. And you think about what we need to get this country back on track. And a lot of people obviously believe that whether they like Trump's personality or not, his, as the word that everybody used, the gravitas, or his, ganas, as we say, or his church bells, or whatever you want to say. I mean,
right.
people need it, man. I mean, people feel like you need something pretty extreme to fight the extreme insanity coming from the left.
One other thing, George, I'm going to let you talk eventually. See, you told me to say more. Now I'm talking all over your stuff.
No, I can't disagree with the thing Nico said. It's true. Look, 2 points, and I'll shut up, Karen. I'll leave it to you. I don't know of a single state-level poll, not one, where polling's happened where Trump's not ahead by double digits. Yeah. Could be wrong.
Are you trying to say I told you so to both of us?
No, no, I'm. That's really not my style. Nico and I have been
friends. Then why are you laughing? It's totally your style, George.
To say I told you?
You don't say it.
Not in those words.
Go ahead. Not in those words. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. It's the subtlety compliment. No. But I don't know a single one. I could be wrong. If somebody could, again, who's listening, call me on the carpet on that, I'm happy to learn. I also have seen 2 YouGov surveys and a Rasmussen poll that shows Trump favorable over Biden nationally. Because that's the great question. Who cares about Trump in the primaries? He has 0 chance of winning in a general election. I think it's hogwash. It's a bunch of BS. And so I think it looks very good for Trump. Trump is his own best friend and his own worst enemy. Let's see what happens. But right now, from a polling perspective, I think it's inarguable that Trump's doing very well. When we talk about this,
let's talk about it. I saw an interesting, only a portion of a podcast of him on a podcast where, like, in one day got 5.7 million views.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know who these people were. We can talk about it, but his demeanor, his style, when he's conversational, he's actually more tolerable to listen to when he's just talking regular and he's not on a stage.
Maybe we can talk about his Achilles heel.
Yeah.
That he's not wrong.
Give Nico some red meat here.
We are going to continue next. Remember, you can go to sidebartv.com and find the platforms we are on, including Facebook Live. We'll be right back.
With reputations as respected high-level prosecutors in Bexar County, the attorneys of LaHood Norton Law Group bring invaluable practical knowledge from the other side of the aisle
This is Sidebar, and as always, we want to thank our listeners and our viewers on Facebook Live. We do Facebook Live during the show, and after the show, we continue the conversation. If you want to find out how to get there, go to sidebartv.com. And as always, we're trying to expand people's minds and maybe give out information that you haven't heard anywhere else, but also we just want you to benefit from listening, whether you follow the same lines of what we may believe or differ. And we always want you to come on to Facebook Live, and I'm always looking at comments, and you can have questions that I'll read and introduce to the guys. And then afterwards, we will do Facebook Live for about 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah, well, iron sharpens iron, Karen. And you make your own position stronger when you can spar with ideas, and that we call that critical thinking with someone that doesn't share. And that's why, I keep bringing him up on the show, because I think he models it well, Bill Maher. I mean, Bill Maher has people on the show. I mean, I disagree with Bill Maher on the majority, the vast majority of his positions, but he models passionate, humorous debate, but cordial and professional. And then I love that he does that. And so we need to do that more. You need to share ideas. We need to have free thinking, free speech, free thought. And this whole inclusivity movement out there is not very inclusive at all. This whole tolerant movement is not tolerant at all. And we need to do that. And so I know we're gonna talk about that more when we get to other topics tonight. But so that's true. So and the reason why we're on Facebook Live during the radio portion now is because of Salo and Dom. So their help and their work with us has been great. So thank you to both of them.
And I must, because of them, I must say that there is a place on sidebartv.com where you can become a sponsor or contributor. Please check that out so we can keep them here instead of me having to use my phone.
Your phone? We've come
Facebook
a long
Live.
way over the years, right? Right.
Okay, let's talk about Trump DeSantis. So Trump, he wasn't it just recently, was it this past week where again he was saying maybe some bad stuff about DeSantis, like, is he really doing that good of a job in Florida? And what's the deal with him? And it really, I always get a big question mark above my head because I think, well, he is doing well in the polls. He is the runaway candidate or, person that's going to be in that position. So why does he keep doing that? And why doesn't he shut up? I don't get that.
I don't think that I don't have any problems with him going after DeSantis. He can go after whoever he wants. I think he needs to make sure that his blows land. He needs to make sure he has effective, that what he's saying is true, and that it's truly a weakness for his opponents. Sometimes Trump, to use Bill O'Reilly's old word, just kind of bloviates. And sometimes he says things that I think stretch the truth a little bit. being nice here. He's hyperbolic. He's sensational. He's kind of an avid, constant 24/7 marketer of self. The average human being struggles with pride. I think Trump probably takes that to a whole new level. And I think he just loses himself in the process. And some of it's humorous. You guys just got to laugh because you wonder, does this guy have any self-awareness? And
is anybody going to challenge him?
And I've wondered that from the very beginning, but I have to say, I think he does. And I think some of it, he does know. Salo believes he knows how to manipulate the media very well. And I think he's been largely effective by that. With that in the background, I think that Trump's Achilles heel, and I'm surprised that he's brought up the topic as it pertains to DeSantis, because I think DeSantis has been largely effective on this, Nico, and I don't think this is a blow that's going to land well. He has been critical of DeSantis's response with regard to COVID.
Don't get me started.
And exactly. So this is a part where I'm just going to sort of
sit back. I'm going to sit back and
let you rant. But you see where I'm going with this, because this is a weakness and that I think Trump has. His concerted push for Operation Warp Speed was a disaster. That's where I sit on this. To claim that it's the best thing next to sliced bread in terms of these worthless vaccines that do not do what basic vaccines ought to do, which is to prevent the transmissibility of infectious disease. Everybody knows these things don't do. They weren't tested for that. We've talked in here ad nauseum about really rather under-tested, and I'm being kind, vaccines rushed to market, very lame tox data, even lamer human data, and then hoisted upon literally billions of people. And sort of at this point, knowing what we know, fanning those flames of pseudo-success without considering really the very real possibility that these vaccines have induced much more death and destruction, right? Rather than the purported lives that they saved. I think there's a tone deafness there. And I think that Trump ought to, at the very least, run away from this thing. I think he ought to avoid it. And so for him to open any kind of discussion into COVID, especially at DeSantis, who I think has been largely effective on how he's pushed back on the administrative straight with regard to vaccines. I think Joseph Ladapo, his attorney general in the state, not his attorney general, I'm sorry. Surgeon General. Surgeon General. No, I just said that. I like his attorney general too, by the way. But But I mean, I think largely DeSantis has been on point with regard to his positions on vaccines. So I don't know why he did that. I think he's opening canning worms. I do think that's a weakness, and I think that a lot of his base believes what I just said. So I don't know. I don't know what the strategy is.
He doesn't. One thing that you describing about Trump, it's called haughtiness. I mean, so there's pride in doing good work. You want to do great work. I want to be great at what I do. I want to produce a good product. And then there's haughtiness, the bad pride, where you're so prideful you can't be corrected, and you have no humility that you cannot repent. And that's what you sense from Trump. I told you last week, I think it was, that I saw one interview or a clip of an interview where he says, "Look, I could be wrong." I was like, "What? I've never heard him say that before." I mean, you could be wrong.
Right.
Let you walk on water.
But seriously.
I said I could be. I didn't say I was. And so all I'm saying is, so that's haughtiness. And then Scripture talks about haughtiness in Proverbs 6:16. That means you can't course correct. There's no humility to where you can't truly repent if you do something wrong. I think that's a good point. I think Trump loses credibility in that issue when he criticizes DeSantis, because not to say that DeSantis did everything perfect. Okay, he might have done. Everybody freaked out at the beginning.
It's true.
Governor Abbott, everybody did. I mean, but from a net result, DeSantis crushed everybody. On a net result, he crushed everybody. He definitely did better than Trump did. I mean, when you think about that, I know they're not the same, apples and apples comparison. I mean, Trump didn't fire Fauci. Trump complimented Fauci. He said they had a great relationship. He said this, and then all of a sudden now he's the devil. And then that Operation Warp Speed, we've talked about. There was a time in here, Karen, as you remember, we couldn't talk about anything other than the shots because it was current
constant.
events. It was every week. Your card and your passport and your this and shutting down and
losing your job.
And just for people that are listening, that maybe we don't know who's listening every week. I mean, George is not just talking out of his butt. I mean, he's a chemist. He worked for pharma. He worked for Merck. I mean, he actually worked in the laboratory. And he worked in clinical development. And also he knows, I mean, this is his area of expertise per se. And that's why, that's why we drugged George in years ago to talk about, PPE protection. And he was going to be our expert witness and come on for a week or two. And then.
And all things considered, all factors being equal, an unabashed supporter of Trump.
Who?
I am.
Oh, yeah.
Of Trump for the presidency of the United States, and I'm going to support him again in 2024. But I'm pointing out what I think should be obvious.
Calling balls and strikes, and I like that.
I think this is a weakness for him. I do, and he needs to find a way. He's got to land somewhere, and it's got to be reasonable. He could either say, "Look, this was a mistake," and in retrospect, it was a mistake, and I was advised. I'm not a scientist, and frankly, I just received some, and Kurt will cancel me out, but blankety blank advice.
Yeah.
From some people who really didn't have our best interests in mind. The coronavirus task force was a disaster. Anybody who watched that, that sort of interplay between Anthony Fauci and Deborah
George,
Birx.
what do you think about this? I mean, so you have Trump who went from, hey, hydroxychloroquine, what is it? What's not going to hurt you? I mean, and then you're telling people to take all kinds of bad chemicals, which, of course, that was taken out of context, to now this vaccine is the end all, save all, and because of me, well, you didn't do the BS studies, and they weren't any studies, and we talked about that on the show. But I mean, it's a weird kind of development he's gone through on that continuum of where he stood on this.
That's the right word.
Don't you think him in that position, having never been in politics, having never been a politician, had his main issue with me is it's as if he was having a conversation with everybody. He would talk out his ideas, and then the media just ripped apart every single thing he said. Like, he told us to drink bleach, or he told everybody they had to do this, but it was because they were against him from the very beginning. Sure. And that's not a lie. That's really what happened. Yeah.
Well, look, that could be it. I mean, look, the guy has Tourette's, it seems like, and I get that. He just kind of blurts some things out, and like he's his own worst enemy sometimes. I mean, I've seen him. I'm watching this clip of this podcast. It's called the Full Send Pod. I never heard of these folks. Two young dudes, and they seem to be. Do you know who they are, Dom?
Yeah, I watched it.
Oh, did you watch that? Okay.
What is it called?
Full Send Podcast. They have like 2 million followers. I mean, wow. I have no idea who they were. They had Trump on before with 7 million views the first time. They took it down, which I can't stand that crap. And then on this one, it's only been up for a day, and there's like 5-point-something million views on an interview. And Trump's just, look, whether you like him or not, he's not afraid to do just a sit-down interview, a full-length interview. Biden just does sound bites, and you got the Easter Bunny pulling him off set.
That's right.
And then you got Trump willing to sit down and just talk. And now this was going to be considered a quote-unquote friendly interview, but it's not like Trump hasn't done hostile interviews. I mean, he loves hearing himself talk, and so he doesn't mind taking on these.
And it's quite likely, to your point, that Biden is going to avoid any and all debating in the primaries. In fact, I think they've announced that there's not going to be any debates in the primary.
Think about that. And look who's in the primary with him now. So Bobby Kennedy announced, and he's got 14% already.
He does. He's got 14%.
Robert Kennedy has 14%. He just announced. I mean, and so now what I heard somebody report that now Biden, who wasn't going to announce till July, is thinking about announcing next Tuesday, just to kind of set the tone and make sure, try to keep other people from out. But Bobby, look, I know Bobby. I've in vaccine advocacy and education, he's been a champion for truth for decades. He's a classical liberal. I don't know where his stances are on everything. He believes in God and country and family. It's like his uncle. I mean, he's an old school blue dog, liberal, classical liberal. He's not a leftist from everything I've known of Bobby. I've advocated with him in DC.
And on this position, on the issue of what we're just talking about with regard to COVID vaccines, Bobby's position is exactly what Trump's base position is.
Well, let me tell you,
he is far closer to Trump's base on this than Trump is.
And Bobby told me this, that Trump was going to put him on some special force, vaccine panel, task force, when he first came into office. Allegedly, a phone call from Bill Gates, billionaire to billionaire, and then Bobby says that Trump went dark on him. I mean, his people were talking to his people. He goes, look, I don't really care for the dude, but I mean, if he's open-minded to listen to this stuff, I want to sit down and talk. And look, Bobby will debate. Bobby debated Alan Dershowitz on the Value Entertainment podcast, and it wasn't really a debate; it was a discussion. And Bobby crushed him with facts. And I like Alan; he's an educated man, but he's nowhere in the same atmosphere as Bobby on this issue.
I still have a bunch of questions about this. Let's stay on this topic, and we will be right back with more Sidebar.
Sidebar. Please remember to go to sidebartv.com. You can watch us on Facebook Live during the show and after the show. Sidebartv.com.
So we're talking about Trump and DeSantis and What were we talking about now? I forgot. We talk about too much during the break. Away. No, we talk about so much during the break.
Another section during the break.
I forget.
People, yeah. No, we were talking about. I mentioned Bobby Kennedy announcing he had 14%
right.
of the primary already, and that obviously that should be alarming to anybody. I mean, you have. And then who's going to jump in there? There's no one really to jump in. Buttigieg supposedly has 9%, and he hasn't even announced, and he's working. That guy's in that job.
Ridiculous.
I mean, so think about that. And then, of course, you have more people on the Republican side. Larry Elder jumped in on the race, which I like Larry, but I don't know what he's running for. He's not going to win.
No.
But, I mean, and then you have that Vivek dude who's a great thinker. I'm just curious what people. Nikki Haley's at 3%. Pence didn't announce. Did he announce? Pence?
No, I don't think he has formally announced.
No, I don't think so. And Mike Pompeo's not going to run. He made that announcement last week or the week before.
Why would Pence jump in? That doesn't even make sense.
I have no idea. Look, I mean, the bottom line is whether people like it or not, it's going to be Trump. So what you have to pray and hope for, that Trump's getting good advice, is that he can course correct on where he needs to. And George's point is valid about his base. And I think even people outside his base, believe it or not, there's a lot of people questioning this. We've talked about this before. We remember if there was a period of time, we were talking about the VAERS numbers every week, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, which is an arm of the CDC. It's not some crazy place. It's an arm of the CDC. And they were reporting adverse events to all vaccines, by the way. That's been for decades, but of course, specifically to the COVID one. And the numbers were alarming. And the problem was, as we talked about many times before as well, is that there's only a 1% reporting. It's self-reporting.
Yeah,
and only
that
about,
sudden illness syndrome, it continues. Yeah. And you see it in the news all the time.
So, I mean, so this is where Trump's just way off base here, and he doesn't seem to course correct. He even got sideways with someone who's a staunch supporter of his, Candace Owen, over this issue months ago. And that became a little hoopla. It didn't turn into as big of an issue as I thought it was going to, and I'm glad for that. But he can't course correct. And that's where I mean, he seems humble in other areas, but on certain things, he just digs his heels in, which is a good quality at times. But as we say all the time, George and I say on the R-Rated podcast, every strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness. And so, he's got to course correct on this one because a lot of people don't agree with him on this. And I think it's to George's point, it's an Achilles heel for him.
I think so too. We've talked about the sudden death issue is not going away. We just simply haven't talked about it, but it continues to be. And I think that that's a tripwire. I do. It's a right in your face concern, and there just aren't plausible, reasonable explanations for that, other than the fact that we've seen a precipitous increase in those sudden deaths since the release of COVID vaccines on December 14th of 2020. Am I saying that they caused it? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that you've got a correlative relationship. It's unquestionable. And we see a significant spike since the release of those vaccines. And the idea that we're not going to employ substantial amount of clinical dollars to investigate that is the height of irresponsibility. That's all I'm saying. And you could clearly see the shift in the data trend. I think that's a tripwire for Trump. I can't imagine somebody won't bring it up. I can tell you if Robert Kennedy was in the debate with him, it would come up. And it would be a fairly easy way to ask the question. I would say, Mr. President, we know as a matter of research that between 1966 and 2004, that's almost 40 years, there were an average of about 29 deaths per year in persons 35 years of age and younger. Okay. I can't think of, Mr. President, a single month between June of 2021 and now where it's been less than 29 deaths per month. Now, that's a significant increase.
Just.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I know you're not a scientist, but there's been a lot of discussion about the only other thing that seems to provide some sort of explanatory value is a mass vaccination program. You might have heard of it. So, I mean, that's just one example. This isn't going away. That trend continues. It's underreported. It's unfortunate, but it's real. So
yeah,
anyway.
and I don't know how, we're going back to your original question, Karen, about Ron DeSantis. I don't know how he does on these full-length interviews. I mean, I thought that one he did, it wasn't that great when he
no
did,
fireworks. I know.
Who did he interviewed on Fox?
Remember,
Was it Pierce?
I saw the interview with Piers Morgan is the
I didn't
one
see
that
the
I
whole
had
thing.
in mind, yeah.
And so that's why I'm trying to not be overly critical, but he just doesn't seem. He seems. I think a lot of people, for whether you like Trump or not, you feel like you're getting Trump. I mean, because he's the same. He's the same on podium, off podium. Not exactly the same. I think there's a little bit more showmanship when he's on podium. I saw that, to Dom's point, I saw that full send. I saw a portion of it, of that podcast. And when he's kind of just sitting down and just kind of being himself, just talking back and forth, he's really more, people can have a conversation with him. He seems more reasonable. I've seen old interviews of him on Donahue and with Oprah and Barbara Walters, and they all loved him back then, by the way.
Of course they did, yes.
And I mean, of course, he was a lot more articulate back then. He didn't seem as distracted as he gets now. But he's been pretty damn consistent. I mean, China was an issue back then. America First was an issue back then. You know, not having, fake politicians was an issue back then. He didn't say the word swamp, but he kind of alluded to it. And he's been pretty consistent. Whether you like him or not, he's been pretty consistent. I think a lot of people don't like his delivery over the last whatever years versus his positions. And so when you say, why are you... Look, I criticize Trump as much as I affirm him. You know that. I mean, I try to do my best to call balls and strikes. I mean, do I think that he's what the country needs? I really do. I mean, and I can objectively kind of walk that out and talk it out. Doesn't mean I have to like him as a person. I don't know him as a person. It doesn't mean I have to like his personality. It doesn't mean I have to like his quirkiness. Doesn't mean I like his arrogance, which falls into his personality. Doesn't mean any of those things. The analogy is, I'm in an ER, my child is really injured, and I need somebody who's capable of saving my child. I don't care if the person, what they think at the time. I don't care if they're arrogant. I don't care if I don't like them as a person. I don't care if whatever. I want you to save my child. I think that, and I'm not being hyperbolic, I'm just being very objective. I think our country is in that state. When you look at the division in our society, when you look at the uncertainty internationally, when you look at our enemies smelling weakness, you sense it. It's almost, for me, maybe I'm a little more in tune on this stuff, but you almost sense the shark swarming you. You can, I mean, if you're paying even a little bit of attention, you sense the confidence of other countries, almost the arrogance, and then you see the President Biden. I mean, it's embarrassing. It really is. It just does not exude confidence when you walk into a room when you think, yep, that's my president. Because he's my president. Whether we like it or not, he's the president of the United States. I'm an American citizen. He's my president. I didn't vote for him, but he's my president. And I want him to do well because he's my president and because I love this country. But this is not a great country anymore. And that's just a fact. It's the best country. It's not great. We need to try to do our best to make it better. Not even great I want to make it just better. Let's start with better. I want to make it better. And Biden couldn't do it. Build Back Better is not work. It didn't work. There's nothing better. It's Build Back Worse. So I just think that's the analysis we need to get into when we talk about Trump.
Well, don't you think, though, that, I don't know, that you are not alone in the shark circling us, but that may be the reason bills like that one in Washington get passed, because that weakness is allowing people's feelings, what we've been talking about for years now.
People don't know what that Washington bill, once you say it, Karen, tell them what it is. We'll talk about it now if you want.
What happened is a Washington bill exempting youth shelters from having to contact parents if a child seeks gender-affirming health care or reproductive care passed. And so what does that mean, George? That if a child who believes they're trans goes to that state, the parents no longer have any right to get them, take them out.
Well, look, I haven't read the bill, so maybe George looked over it this week. I did not, but it sounds similar to the California bill, where if you can get, and forget about kidnapping a child or taking a minor across state lines, forget about all those federal stuff. If you can get a child to California, then they can actually become a ward of the state and the parent can't get that child back. That's absolute insanity. Forget that. This country is done. If that becomes the trend where you don't have any decision-making over your children, your own children. Now, look, check this out. A parent does not have the right to consent to a child getting a tattoo. You can't. A child can't get a tattoo under a certain age. Well, and no child can get a tattoo. A child cannot consent to sex.
Buy cigarettes.
A child can't do anything, but a child can choose their gender. Not a child. That doesn't mean a child can't feel a certain way. That's a different discussion. I'm talking about acting on those feelings. Let that sink in. This is so illogical. It's not logically consistent. It violates the law of non-contradiction, because you can't say a child does not have the mental capacity to do this, but has the mental capacity to do this. A tattoo, something you just put on your skin, a child cannot consent to. can't even make a decision. Child can't make a decision to go to school, to drive, to fly a plane, to do anything, nothing. But yet they can make a decision on their gender, can act on it, and the parent can say, But a parent can't say, I want my child to get a tattoo. I want my child to have a face tattoo or a neck tattoo. That child would be arrested for endangering a child or injury to a child. Guaranteed. There's no doubt about that. If a parent says, hey, you can have sex with my child. That's my child. I can make a decision. They can do that. They want to have sex with you. You can have sex. You'd get arrested for trafficking a child, prostitution, whatever, sexual assault on a child by way of law of parties. But yet the child says, I want to change my gender. Yes, you can change your gender. And then you mutilate the child to change their gender, giving them hormones and actually... Tell me how that makes sense. Make it make sense to me, and they can't. That's why they call you names, to shut you up.
I mean, this is communism 101. I mean, the loss of parental rights, which is in essence what this bill does.
Yeah.
It usurps parental rights. A child can run away from home to seek so-called gender-affirming care without parental consent. And the state is prohibited from informing parents where their son and daughter is living. Now, it doesn't even apply to just cases where there's abuse in a household. You don't even need that. It doesn't even have to be alleged, let alone proven. It applies in all cases, as I understood the verbiage of the bill, where a minor leaves their family home to seek health care on their own. So this is nuts. The child becomes a ward of the state, in effect, and the state takes responsibility of that child, and the parent can't do a damn thing about it. This isn't unprecedented. You've got the same nuttery in California. But this is a huge, huge steps change. This is communism being implemented, folks.
But Karen, we need to talk about now the lines have literally been drawn, because on the bill, at least in Congress, now nationally, let's go to nationally, on protecting women in sports. Same kind of similar issues. These are collateral issues. You had a direct vote across party lines. Not one Democrat voted to protect women in their own sports. Not one Democrat voted for that.
We are going to continue with that conversation coming up next on Sidebar. Facebook Live, and I want to bring it up now. James Van Cleve just a little while ago said the only thing that matters right now is who counts the votes when it comes to Trump and DeSantis. And Patty said, hey, it's politics. Maybe he should tone it down, but isn't that what politics are all about? And then what was it that I was reading? Nico, who is it Moloch? Moloch, the people sacrificed kids to him in the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's the false god that they were sacrificing kids to in the Old Testament.
Kimberly also said, if indeed a child goes to Washington or California, is the parent still financially responsible for the insurance that covers that, or is it going to be the state that pays for that? I guess.
And if you become a ward to the state, I mean, I would argue, and then you got the kid, it's your kid. I mean, you've adopted the child, so to speak, for that period of time. Now you award for a period of time, then you hand the kid back to the parents, changed and hurt and injured and all these other things. I don't know. But I mean, it's just, it's almost, we can't use the word insanity enough today. Again, and I love that Bill Maher calls it out. There was some big debate, I guess. Friends of mine send me stuff and send you stuff too, George. because they know that we talk about these things so much. I guess there was some debate on Dr. Phil where some 5th grade teacher was on there, and I didn't get a chance to look through it. But I mean, it's the anger from the other side. You can't have a conversation because they cannot reason with you through this. You can't. I mean, you listen to people that lean left, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not on this one. I'm not on board on this one." And then it gets into the discussion. I had a friend of mine who votes Democrat, but he's more of a classical, old school, blue dog, but he's still very Democrat. And he says, "Are you a one-issue voter?" I go, "No. I mean, I'm not a one-issue voter per se, but there are issues that are more important to me than others." And then you just have to weigh it out because no candidate's going to be perfect. There's not. And so, and on this issue, I asked him, and I pressed him back. And he's like, "No, I'm just not on board with this." I go, "I agree, but there's so much more implications to this than we think." I mean, think about where this is going. Corporations are jumping on board. I mean, science is being rewritten. Sports have been stolen. I mean, schools are being influenced, locker rooms, and it all started where? With a bathroom. And how crazy we were to say, man, just shut up. It's just a bathroom. What do you care? I care because I'm not saying I'm Nostradamus. I mean, there's other people out. I mean, nobody can predict the future. I'm just saying ideas have consequences. Right. And the idea that a biological male, regardless of how the biological male presents themselves, goes into a restroom with little girls and females, that's a problem. Just that idea is a problem. I mean, here's an idea. Is it a good idea to have no walls in a bathroom where men and women can go into, and a woman sits on a toilet to go to the bathroom, and a man with stands and just pees in a urinal? Is that a good idea? Now, I'll put that to an 8-year-old. And no, most people would say no. Well, okay. Well, okay. What are you going to do with that idea then? That's called bathrooms, and so we have to look at the biology of people when we're talking about bathrooms. That's where it started. It seems like to me. I'm not saying that's exactly where it started. It's an ideology. But look where it's at. This is over 5 or 6 years only. This is not. So think about the next 5 or 6 years. Biden wasn't talking about this. Obama wasn't talking about this. For sure, Clinton wasn't talking about this. Bill. I mean, but now we are. So what's happening? And now we know because of that vote in Congress on saving women's sports. Now we know for sure it's a partisan issue. And even if most Democrats that aren't the candidates, now we know it's a partisan issue. So now the Democrats they need to take their party back. And I encourage that. There needs to be a revolt in the Democrat Party to take the Democrat Party back and lean more towards a Robert Kennedy Jr. versus a Joe Biden.
And take it back from communist influence. That's what's at issue. We're dealing with, this is the point. Nico's talking about a classic liberalism that was very present in the American Democratic Party not too long ago. I can remember just 10 years ago, where you actually had some dissenters. You actually had Democrats who genuinely loved the country as founded, and we simply disagreed on policy. And they would break for the other side. You don't see any of that. I mean, these people they line up in a party vote. This is very scary stuff, man. This is the kind of stuff you see in third world countries. It really is. This is politics of power. That's all this is. And they have edged their bets. They believe this is where the power is. Everybody lines up. This transgenderism cult is the latest battering ram, they believe, against American traditionalism, and they think it's effective. And it is subsumed our academic institutions. We are killing an entire generation of young folks. There's been recent social research on this, which I think casts a light on their strategy, I think, because there seems to be an elevated propensity towards violent radicalization in a transgender population. I want to read just a short clip from McConey et al., their research group that put out a paper, peer-reviewed journal called Front Psychiatry, February 11th of 2022. Quote, transgender and gender-diverse youth emerge as the group at the highest risk of support for violent radicalization. This is in line with results of a recent survey conducted during the pandemic that highlighted high levels of support for violent radicalization, as well as psychological distress among gender minorities. And so what you see here is, and this is, if I hate to use the word brilliant, but it is, if you're after power and if you're after crushing the opposition, and that is your biggest and highest goal, not persuading, Nico, not, as you say, jousting between ideas. That's the American model. But this is an attack on America as founded. This is the politics of power. And so they see this as a very effective way to dissolve the connections or the ties that bind really sort of our history to our youth. This is a great way to do it, because this is really the opposite of the Judeo-Christian ethical mindset.
Right.
This is a huge attack on the nuclear family, and they think it's effective. What you're doing is you're combining a political agenda with really the susceptibilities of individuals who have psychological and emotional vulnerabilities.
I don't want to hear the same people argue science with me. I just don't want to. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to. Oh, the climate change, and I mean, it went from global warming decades. Well, first of all, it was global cooling, from what I understand, in the 20s, right? Because everything was going to get colder, they thought. Then it went to global warming, and then, according to Al Gore, we should have been burned up by now. So then, can't do that one now. Well, it can't be warming because it's not that much warmer. So let's do climate change. Well, of course the climate's going to change. I mean, we've talked about that on the show before, and it's whether industry and whether we're causing it to change in a rapid way, to where it's dangerous. But so if everybody believes in climate change, but all that to say is they claim science and they call you a science denier if you're not rabidly on this climate change, the greatest threat to humanity type movement. Or
gender sex.
Well, this is
same thing.
You see the MO? And remember a couple years ago, you couldn't have a conversation without what? Skin color, black or white. That's it. Everybody jump on board. Churches and schools and corporations and this, everybody jumped on, and that divided our country. Then it went to what? Mask or no mask. And then it's like, I choose to wear a mask. I proudly choose to wear a mask. Okay, great. I don't care. Don't tell me if you're wearing your underwear either. I don't need to hear about that. And so, and then that turned into everything. They made memes about it and everything. People put it on their Facebook. And then it was like shot or no shot. It's what's the next thing dividing us? But this is so at the core of our humanity, womanhood. And then you get men advertising women's bras and sports bras. Where are the women's group? I read something, I thought we talked about it on R-Rated, George, where some of these quote-unquote radical women's groups have departed from the Democrat Party because it's like, wait a minute.
Finally?
You're erasing the woman.
Right.
We should be celebrating women. I have 2 daughters. George has 3. You have 2. We should be celebrating women. I want to celebrate womanhood. And so it's nuts. I mean, there's no other way to say it. And so more people need to speak out and vocally about it. And it doesn't mean, and we need to push back against the BS label of disagreement means hate. No, disagreement means disagreement. Because again, if you're going to play that game with me, then I'm going to call you a Christian phobe. I'm going to call you a Jesus phobe. I'm going to call you, because everybody can crap on that ideology, but yet you can't have an opinion about something else. And I just call BS on it, and I will not be quiet about it.
I can't get away from the fact that this is fundamentally a heartbreaking thing. These are individuals who are really, really in pain. There are some very serious underlying mental problems, and they're not getting the help that they need. And as a Christian, as a believer, I'm heartbroken over it. And then I'm enraged by the fact that it's being exploited for political purposes. That is just the height of evil. The individuals who are exploiting, the political machinery that is exploiting these vulnerable individuals, the vast majority of them, young persons, who we know as a matter of research will outgrow this in adolescence. And in their most vulnerable state, instead of the help that they need, they're being leveraged for political power to undermine really sort of the philosophical opposition, which is traditional America. This is disgusting. It's unbelievable. But it is, in fact, if you're listening to me, we mentioned on R-Rated, I just want to clarify, this is Marxist at the core. These people are taught to viscerally hate anyone who disagrees with them. Anyone who disagrees with them is inherently evil. So even if I disagree with them and I'm concerned about them harming themselves, then I am worthy of hate. And I should be destroyed. And so you're seeing this violence foment in the transgender community as a result of that delusion. This is paranoia. It's a neo-Marxist model that's now being adapted to them. I mean, we've seen it. We saw it in 1917 with the Russian Revolution again. You have the oppressors, the workers, and then you have the capitalists You've seen it apply to race with critical race theory. We've seen it apply to now with gender theory, to transgenderism. This has got to stop. The human loss is incalculable.
Yeah, and to our society, where does it go to our society? And so more people need to speak up. We're going to talk about these things on the after show.
Not only that, but there are so many people on Facebook that are saying, please talk about Proposition A.
Yeah, we'll talk about Prop A also on the after show. Look, the bottom line is vote against it. It's a crappy idea. It's ridiculous to not prosecute thefts under 750 and criminal mischief, meaning you can destroy property under whatever it is, 2,500 and other things. I mean, it's complete insanity. I have to get credit where credit. I'm glad more people are jumping on now this, and more people in politics, because they're going to have to be voted in May as well. But vote against Prop A. Look, only 12% of people are going to vote for the mayor and city council. And this Prop A. That's insane.
Yeah.
So people need to vote. Get out there and vote. It's easy to vote. You can vote early, but just vote. So, guys, hope you'll join us on the after show. We'll be on for about 30, 45 minutes for those that will not, and just do the radio. Thank you for joining in this week, and you have a blessed week.
all of the topics that we had today, guys, I wish that we had another hour for each of the topics because there are so many questions I have. I know it's probably like boring to some people, but that Dominion voting system thing, I still don't understand why. I'm sort of with you, Nico. I just think that they wanted to get rid of it, done, out of the way.
$750 million. What is it? Was it million?
$787 million.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's not just, I mean, they obviously did a net analysis, I guess. I don't know what those depositions showed. I don't know what the emails showed. I don't know what the discovery showed. I mean, they had to think about, again, hauling in Tucker and anybody that was subpoenaed. And I mean,
yeah, it's too much to deal with.
Some of it would have just
probably
been a show on the other side just to put stress on them. And they probably have to think about the goodwill of their organization long term and just paying this and get it over with. I mean, again, CNN did the same thing. So for Don Lemon to say something stupid as he normally does about saying, "Oh, we've never done this," and what are you talking about? It's the same thing, other than you paid less money because it was a smaller lawsuit.
But as we ended the show, you talking about all of the hot topics that are the hot topic of the whatever of the week, whether it was the vaccine, BLM, climate change. I mean, those things, even if you don't follow politics, you have to see how those topics that are thrown out to take over the news of the now, they don't make sense. That's what gets me. They don't make sense enough to create an entire party, but they are.
Well, are you talking about what do you mean? In these issues, these current issues versus the Democrat Party?
Yes. Like, how do they come up? It seems like diversions every single time.
Well, but the diversions have turned into
the
new norm. Well,
right.
I mean, look, and that's the party pushes back. I mean, then it becomes the party standard now. I mean, if you have candidates that don't support X, Y, and Z, they don't make it past the primary, then it doesn't matter.
But how can an entire, political group have some ideas that they're just actually lies? They're just
nobody
lies.
Says anything. Look, if a lie goes unchecked, it becomes the truth. And so this is what's happened. I mean, it's been a hijacking of the Democrat Party. I said that back when I was running under that umbrella. And I said, these people, wait a minute, these meetings are getting weirder. These people are whatever. And because I haven't changed any of my positions. I've always been pro-life. I've always been pro-America, pro-family, strong borders, truth, traditional family values. I mean, I've been the same. I believe in restorative justice when it comes to stupid, poor choices, and tough on crime when it comes to violent choices I literally have not changed the position. I've matured in certain things, and I've thought of other issues, and I've learned, I've grown. I'm going to continue to grow and learn and mature. But my positions foundationally have been the same. But the party has completely changed. And all you got to do is look at the party over the decades. Look at Robert's uncle, John, and his daddy. Look at Obama in 2008. Look at Clinton in 95. Look at Biden.
Look at Biden.
50 years.
In 07.
Schumer, Feinstein, Reed, all of them. They all have changed. Why? Have they really changed? They really had some epiphany and they woke up and said, you know what? I think it is okay for kids to have transgender surgery. I really do think it's okay to have due date abortions. I really do think it's okay to have open borders. I really do think it's okay that parents don't have rights over their children. I really do think it's okay for schools to go to hell in a handbasket and defund the police. I really think these are great ideas to demilitarize our country and give everything over to our enemies. Who the hell thinks that's good shit? I mean, that's stupid. But this is where it's gone. And if you stay quiet, then that narrative becomes the standard because it wasn't rejected back then. And so I look at the Democrat Party doesn't want to be seen as this communistic party. And that's not calling every Democrat a communist. Don't get me wrong. I'm talking about the leadership. And anyone that votes Democrat, unfortunately, you're voting for the ideas that the leadership is trying to implement. And I really try to break it down that way. I'm not calling, I know some beautiful Democrats, they claim they're Democrats that love the Lord, that believe in strong family, that are pro-life, that we would not want their daughter being beat up in a wrestling match or in a martial arts match or in basketball or volleyball. That girl got injured because that guy spiked that ball on her and hit her in the face. I mean, your daughter plays volleyball very well, by the way. I mean, you just don't want that. She'd lose a scholarship. Can't compete. I mean, I mean, and then the irony is this. Oh gosh, who said it? It was really good. That Buttigieg or whatever his name is was just asking for money for female crash dummies. So you're making the argument that there's a distinction between male and female.
Right.
We need specific female crash dummies to test car safety, but yet there's not a distinction in sports and anywhere else. I mean, it's so logically, that's why they don't want to engage in the arena of ideas, and they want to shout you down, call you names, or assault you, or cancel you because they can't win a debate.
Yeah, I've said something along that thinking to a couple of people, and they just look at me with a sort of long 1,000-yard stare because they don't really grasp what I'm saying. It's not because they're not smart people. It's just because they're not accustomed to think this way as Americans. Americans have it so good, Karen. We really do. We're just not accustomed to the notion that a major political party is actively involved in destroying this wonderful country. We can't fathom that. We can't accept that.
You're so right. You're right.
We just can't accept it. We've never had it. It's unprecedented. America has been something that both parties, to your point about classical liberalism, there's been a mutual pride in the country.
Yes. Yep.
And we've simply disagreed on policy. We've simply disagreed on what's the best way to get to an improved America. We never thought America needed to be fundamentally transformed, like the completely misguided and unbelievably destructive Barack Obama. That's a stupid ass thing to say. It's destructive. And look at the destruction that's really been ensued on the country since 2008. I had great hopes for Obama. I really did. I really hoped that he would use that momentous historic, his first black president. I mean, that's a big deal, and he could have leveraged all that goodwill, and he didn't. He came in and governed decisively from the left, and brought in just untold confusion and destruction. But this is what's happening. This is deliberate. This is communism. That's what. So what do? We really need to understand what the enemy is and how the enemy thinks. And if with respect, if someone is saying they're a Democrat and they take those positions, I don't think the Democrat Party knows that. They're not Democrats, not philosophically.
Of course, no.
I mean, they're not. And it's time that people sort of deal with reality. If you're someone and you vote Democrat because you've always been a proud Democrat, and your daddy and your daddy's daddy, this ain't the party from your daddy's daddy, and it ain't the party from your daddy either. The party's gone, and so we just have to deal with reality.
What I would like to see, and I would love to see an influx, and I think we're seeing it, of independence. Because then they don't get into the tribalistic nature that we've gotten into. I mean, you have people literally, look what happened. I'm telling you, on that women's sports. So you have Democrats that were supposed to be championing women's rights over the years. I've voted against protecting women's sports on party lines. That's insane. Forget Title IX. You're just going to dismantle Title IX. I mean, so they voted against that. So, but if you have independence, they don't have to get into this tribalistic battle. They say, I'm just going to vote for the idea that's best for myself, my family, and the country. Then that's fine too. You know, George Washington warned against political parties. He thought they were divisive, and I think he's right. I've argued, look, let's engage in the discussion of ideas, and let's implement those ideas. Whether you want to label it, as soon as you label an idea, then all of a sudden someone doesn't want to agree with you. Just because you've labeled that idea. And I think that's terrible. And that's why I think we have so much division in this country.
But in the past, people would say that an independent party would take away from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It would make your candidate lose if there was a third party. But things have changed. Yeah. But things have changed. If you aren't a MAGA person, and that's what people think the Republicans are, you know, the MAGA crazies, or if you're not a communist, and that's what some people think now is the Democratic Party, what is left for the people that aren't to the, you know, each extreme? And is it going to affect Democrat, Republican? And isn't that the way America is?
You know,
or
but
no?
that's what that guy that used to be what's his name? Hakeem Jeffries. Extreme MAGA Republicans. That's like that tagline. What do you mean extreme MAGA Republican? I mean, we talked about this before. So you're an extreme MAGA Republican if you want secure borders. I guess Bill Clinton was an extreme MAGA Republican in 1995. You're extreme MAGA Republican if you want fair election. Well, Tracy Abrams said that the election was stolen from her. Hillary Clinton said the election was stolen from her. Energy independence, you're extreme MAGA Republican. Tough on crime. Biden is the one that had that crime bill that everybody jumped on him for because it was really overcorrecting. And those sentencing guidelines in the federal system are really the thing that people are talking about. It's not the state courts. Save babies, extreme rabble. They said it should be rare and safe, abortion. That's what Democrats used to think, or many Democrats. Stop genital mutilation of kids. That's an extreme MAGA Republican. I guess Bill Maher's an extreme MAGA Republican. Put parents first, school choice, protect your constitutional rights, put America first, be proud of your country. That's an extreme MAGA Republican. That used to be. You could have argued that at some point that was a Democrat, actually. I mean, at some point. And then, like you said, you just disagreed on the policies on how to get there and what that really meant. But we agreed on a lot. This is insane. But they just wanted that tagline, extreme MAGA. And I just got to call bullshit on that. And you have to be able to respond back and educate yourself and just talk to people about those ideas. But as soon as you label ideas, then that's when people shut down.
I don't really know what the solution is other than to continue to educate. I mean, there is you have to change the way people think. Otherwise, you're not going to get a change in behavior. So we have to continually look, and Nico and I talk almost ad nauseum about this, looking for opportunities just to, one person, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever, you can change the world one person at a time. And so getting better at persuading, educating yourself on the history of the country, understanding why it's a good idea to return to America as founded. What in the world does that even mean, to return to America as founded? Wow, it seems like such a foreign concept. If you ask the average high school graduate what that means, they'll just say, yeah, you're going to return to an age of excessive and mass racism and bigotry
Slavery
and imperialism. You know, he gets the bullshit line from communists pretending to be teachers in high school classrooms. But you gotta reverse that narrative. So I guess I'm wondering, for you guys who are listening, for those of you who have kids in high school, when was the last time you sat down at, overused the analogy, kitchen table issues? When was the last time you sat down at the kitchen table? Wherever it is you sit down at home. Do you sit down at home, by the way? You should. And talk to your kids about this stuff. What'd you learn in school today? Do you know what classes they take? Do you know if they're taking history classes? Do you know if they're taking biology classes? You should ask them, what do they learn? Nothing. No, you learned something, because if you learned nothing, what the hell were you doing in school all day? So talk to me, engage them, find out substantively what they're saying. And if they say something that's absolutely ludicrous, and the chances are they will have learned something that is absolutely nonsense, are you preparing yourself to have an answer? So this is where you change the next generation, because that kid will start to think, and that kid will start sharing with his friends. And Nico brought up the idea of, if you have a backyard, use it. Use it for something other than just growing really nice plants and having a nice cultivated lawn. How about having an event where you tell your kid to invite 5, 10, 15 of his friends, and we can all come and have a get together and talk about things. There's a concept, rather than just playing video games or burying their time in screen time. Well, something to think about.
And George is bringing that up because on R-rated. I don't know if you saw, Karen.
No, I didn't.
We were just talking about my 14-year-old. And, there's no topic off limit with her. I talk to her. I say, ask me anything. We're going to talk about anything. I ask questions. What'd you guys learn in school today? They know the way we think. We're very open. Christ is preeminent, is premier in our home. And it's Christ first, then us, then mommy and papi, and mommy and papi. And then what we expect of you. And then we always take them back to a biblical answer. And so I told Maya, our oldest, I said, I want you to know why you're a Christian. Not that you're a Christian. Because what does that mean? I mean, I want you to know why, because you have a choice. At some point, you're going to have a choice on how you're going to live your life. I mean, we run this household under biblical principles. I can explain exactly a biblical principle to everything Mommy and I do in this home. But then yet I have rough conversations with her. I talk, and you talk like that in front of your daughter. She's hearing it out there anyway. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, she never hears me use the Lord's name in vain. We talk, and I don't do it every day. I'm just saying that if something comes out, I have passionate, real, raw, talks with my daughter. I want to prepare her for a real, raw, tough world. And that's why they train, and that's why I want them to think. I want my children to be dangerous. I say that all the time. Dangerous with their faith, dangerous with their ideas, dangerous with their thoughts, dangerous with their resolve, and dangerous with their bodies if they have to be, God forbid. I want them to be dangerous. And because then that means they're formidable. If you're not dealing with a dangerous person, then they're not formidable to you.
The idea that you can't use rough language to communicate biblical morality is nonsense, right? I mean, who was Jesus's audience in the first century?
The Ruffins.
I mean, come on, give me a break. So there's a time and a place for everything, and you just gotta use it judiciously. But I think I really fundamentally believe that's where you really start changing the country. If parents across the country, we've had a huge surge in homeschooling.
Backyard barbecues, man.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
It's funny though.
But Karen, that's what we talked about. Go
I
ahead.
know, but it is funny because in my mind, while y'all are talking about that, I'm thinking of my daughters have a group of friends that they went to, elementary, middle school, and high school. They have been friends forever. And during the summer, they all get back together. And every once in a while, they'll bring a new person in. But my girls will always come to me and say, you can talk about what you always talk about with us, but just be gentle around so-and-so because they're, a Democrat, they're fragile. And I'm like, I'm not belligerent about my thoughts, but sometimes when you do talk about what your beliefs are around kids whose parents are liberals, they get offended, run away, and they don't want to be part of the household anymore. So how do you deal with
ask them
that?
questions. I mean, so why do you think the way you think? What do you think? Why do you think that way? How did you get to that conclusion? Ask those questions.
But because the other side, whether it's called Democrat or whatever it is now, they have done a great job of brainwashing those kids.
But that's not reason. It's not, the brainwashing and delusion is not reason.
But haven't you noticed the answer is always, I'm going home. You're
first of all, it's a soundbite, and when the soundbite is responded with facts or data, then it's I'm going home, or it's a name call, or F you, or it's a hit, or whatever, or it's a threat, or it's a cancel, or something like that.
Or their mom is crazy.
Well, that's
right.
But define crazy, right? I mean, so I'm crazy for the truth. I'm crazy for Christ. I'm crazy for the truth. I'm crazy for my children. I'm crazy for my wife. I'm crazy, yeah. But I mean, define crazy and how you live out that crazy. But so if we're gonna kind of save this country, and look, it needs saving, and Trump's not the savior. He's a piece of he's a position. He's a figure, a political figure that because of some of his strengths. That can be a weakness if he takes him too far.
And passion.
And because of some of his strengths is needed to combat the insanity from the left. That's just my opinion. You need someone with that's wired differently, that has that clutch 3-pointer, or that free throw clutch, or that on the line rush, or that it's the 5th round of this MMA fight and you have to win by a knockout or a submission. You're not going to win by points. We're in that type of situation. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. I'm saying we have a border situation that is a crisis. We have kids that are being trafficked at the border, since people care about kids so much unless you're aborting them. So, you have all these issues going on. We have schools, we have division, we have disrespect. Did you see a video last week from Detroit and all some of these big cities? I mean, people say it's Gotham. I didn't watch the Batman series, but I went back and now I know what they mean because I looked it up. Gotham is mayhem. I mean, when someone says it's Gotham, that means it's like
complete
Sodom
breakdown
and
in
Gomorrah.
social order.
And there's no social order. You're on your own. It's a royal rumble in your city. And the strong will survive, survival of the fittest type deal. That's insanity. You cannot thrive in that environment.
Yeah.
You cannot thrive in that environment. And so just the last point, George, I'm going to pitch it off to you. We first started with this. So when George and I were talking, my wife, my daughter and I were talking about get your friends together and I'll talk to them, Angel. Because in my mind, I think to myself, I have 4 years with my oldest daughter, right, before she's going to go to some college. And then we got to really prayerfully consider the right college for her to go to. But even if you go to the right college, you're on your own. You're out of the nest. And I need to prepare her for being out of the nest. I got to prepare her mind, her faith, her logic, her reasoning, and her fists, and her body. Meaning, can she be physical if she has to? I need to prepare it all. And so I got 4 more years. I said, look, if you want to invite your friends over, and we'll do a barbecue in the summers. They can swim, everything. Everybody stays outside. I've seen too much shit. They're not going inside. Everybody's gonna stay outside. We have an little outhouse thing, and then we'll eat and fellowship, and then we'll talk and we'll do Q&A, and I'll just tell their parents, look, they're gonna get a talk, and I'll talk to all the parents who want to, and then if it grows to 15, 20, 50, I don't care. I'll sow into that ministry, and I volunteer at Theo George, so George, we'll just talk and do Q&As, ask questions. But it doesn't have to be 50 kids. It could be 5 kids. It should be your own kids only. I don't know. We have to start fighting for our children's minds. Their minds are the objective of this movement. If you get that kid, and Hitler talked about this, by the way. if you get that kid's minds through music, through whatever it is, through ideology, politics,
that's right,
sports, whatever, then you got the kid, because then their mind will control their behavior.
And you'll have a permanent political disciple. And if you think about it, it's brilliant. It's unbelievably evil and nefarious, but it's effective if they're allowed to do that. On the issue that you were just talking about these sort of backyard meetings, one of the issues that the church has absolutely abandoned is the issue of human sexuality. And it happens to be an issue that is being used, as we just said over the last hour, for political gain here by the Democrat Party, the Democrat Communist Party, I should say. I want to clarify. We can bring a lot of clarity into that issue. So if you have these backyard meetings, that would be a good, relevant topic to talk about human sexuality. It would, because they're not getting it anywhere. They're certainly not getting it in church. It's avoided by parents. Parents are overwhelmed at this point, and we already know what the government's doing with regard to sexuality. Where are they going to get the truth? So I think that would be a good topic, rather than, we're not suggesting you would launch into, hey, vote Republican conversation. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
But talk about issues that are relevant to them, that really resonate with them. And then I would just return also to the idea of Trump, which is a great point. Trump is not the savior for this country. It's the ideas that he represents and that he advances. If they're implemented, they can in fact save the country significantly, at least politically. And so perhaps a way to start the conversation is by kind of breaking it down between the past and the present. So if Trump had remained in office, because he does have the advantage of having had 4 years in office, former president of the United States, and we know what his policies were. So ask, is it conceivable that we would be as entrenched in Ukraine as we are now, even entrenched in Ukraine at all? Do you think that what happened with Ukraine in February 2022 when Putin went into Ukraine, do you think remotely that would even have happened if Trump had been in office? Just from Trump's position with regard to Russia and Trump's posture with regard to China. Can you imagine that for a moment? And the answer is intuitively no. Would we have spent, therefore, $150 to $200 billion that we've spent in the last 2 years? No. Would we have, 5 to 6 million illegal aliens in the country that we've brought in the last 2 years? Is it conceivable that would have happened under Trump? No. Do you think that we would have inflation at 40-year highs given Trump's economic policies?
Would we have our
$4 gas?
Yeah. No, we would not.
No.
Would we have, in fact, responded to a device that was obviously used for espionage that went over United States military and sensitive nuclear arsenal sites for 8 days, a spy balloon, where we basically let it wander off the coast of Myrtle Beach before we shot it down? Do you think that would have been acceptable to Donald J. Trump? Do you think that would have been our response? Do you think it was a good idea to let the Pentagon just kind of sit back and watch that happen? Do you think that would have happened under Donald Trump? The answer is intuitively no. How about all of the people who were forced to leave their jobs as a result of vaccine mandates when Biden first came in? Can you conceive that would have happened under Donald J. Trump? His mistakes with regard to COVID vaccines notwithstanding. Do you think vaccine mandates would have been a thing? Do you think as many people who were victimized by it, do you think that would have happened under Trump? Of course not. And I'm simply I'm just scratching the surface here. So life would clearly be better for the average American, regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat. And you've got to reduce discussions down to those basic facts so that people can say, okay, and a lot of people are terribly unhappy, to the tune of 3/4 of the American electorate are pissed off about where we are today as a country, and their outlook in the future is rather dismal. So I would bring it down to Trump can irritate you all day long in Twitter sphere, but he had 4 years in office. And look at those policies. Look at what those policies would look like today. Look at Biden's lack of policies, but look at the shit that he's done and all the consequences we've seen. It's a clear decision, right? Let's not emote our way into another 4 years of destruction. Let's sit back and think rationally.
This is where tribalism comes in. It doesn't matter. And look, there's people that have
That's why you need relationships with people.
Well, yeah, to
overcome that.
You got to be able to talk through these issues, man. You got to be able to talk reasonably, logically, rationally through these things, unemotionally. Passion's good, emotion's bad, in my opinion. And talk people through these ideas. Just don't label an idea. Just talk through ideas and then you can label it after, I guess, of course. But you just talk through ideas and get people to think a little bit. I don't know anybody that can say that we're better off. I mean, and look, that's not a Trump commercial. I'm just like, look, we're not off. We're not better off. And so then people say, but what are we going to do about it? Are you going to double down with the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to get a different result? And then the thing that people need to wake up to, and I think needs to be messaged, and the Republican Party's fallen on their ass on this, is the people that you're voting for Biden, you're voting for a set of ideas. You're not just voting for Biden, because who votes for that dude? I mean, he's eating ice cream and he's wanting to move to Ireland. Go. But I mean, you're voting for a set. You're voting for a set of ideas that we know now. We have an experiment,
platform of philosophy,
set of philosophy, set of ideas that we know have been implemented into this country. We've seen the result of them. I mean, the idea about this trans. I wanted to make a point because George brought up so much good stuff, and he went into different areas that we could do 2 shows on, which was good. But what I keep hearing is a trans woman is a woman. Just the fact that you have to say a trans woman is a woman, you're saying that there's a standard of a woman, and how are you comparing the trans woman to a woman? A trans woman is a woman. That's, to me, they're trying to make the equation of saying a physician is a doctor. No, that is a doctor, a physician. It's just another way to say a doctor. Do you see the sleight of hand, what they're trying to do? That's like me saying, to me, in my example, like a human being can fly. No, they can't. A human being in a plane can fly. Well, that's different. Then that's not a human being can fly. That's something different. You've added another factor into it. A woman is a woman that has a uterus and that can reproduce children. They can give birth to child. A human woman. That's it, a woman. We have that definition. But now they're trying to redefine definitions. We started with marriage. We started with life. We started with a woman. We started with this. And it gets confusing. And that's the problem we have. Just the fact that someone says all genders. I went downtown UTSA to speak to a college class last week. I was asked to speak to a political class, which I love doing, by the way. But and I just took a picture. I think I sent it to you guys. Did I send it to you guys?
Yep.
It's at a bathroom, which would have normally been unisex bathroom. It says all genders bathroom, whatever I sent you guys. All genders means that there's more than 2. There's 2 genders. Say both genders, unisex, what we used to call it in the old, and they have the male sign and the female sign. That's it. There's nothing else in between. But to say all genders, we're playing games.
That's a great point.
To pacify an ideology that is non-science, it's anti-biology, as they argue science on other issues that are convenient for them. Either you believe in something or you don't, and that principle is consistent across all lines, or it's not. And that's what we have to be able to articulate that, talk it, reason with people, be firm when you have to, be compassionate always, right? Obviously, we always say that, truth without compassion truth without grace comes across harsh, but grace without truth is deception. So we cannot compromise the truth for anybody, including ourselves.
But just as you said and sent the sign that said all genders, I told y'all about a year ago that I was going to go try out a new doctor. And when I was filling out the paperwork, it said male, female, or other. And I just got up and left. I was like,
but I would have told
if
them why
a
you're
doctor doesn't know that. But it was an entire group.
And they're gonna make a decision on your medical health based off your biology, right?
And
I was
think
like,
that's something you would not have seen over the last 4 years. That's a
No.
great, but
Of course.
that's the point. I think you got to bring this, like Nico said, that's a huge area because we talked about it so much. I left that out of my little rant. But that's a great point. You wouldn't have seen a national apparatus get behind a massive delusion. You would never have seen that in the Trump administration. In fact, they had policies to make sure this bullshit wouldn't find its way into the United States military. And the reason why the Pentagon that doesn't have a clue, and because they're actually coming forward and saying it's not just Jack Teixeira, the last Pentagon leaks that we have, they're saying Pentagon has actually come on record and said they actually don't know how many more leaks are out there. This is the height of incompetence from what used to be the world's premier defense organization. This is insane because there's an ideology in there that has rendered these people complete effing idiots. So they're chasing pronouns and they're chasing gender fluidity philosophy in the military when they ought to be focusing on protecting the borders.
China's building up
and protecting the United States from hostile powers.
That is, we are so vulnerable right now, and people just have to acknowledge that. We're the most vulnerable in my lifetime, at least.
That's an accurate statement.
I mean, from our ammunition to our missiles to our defense,
to the mindset. The mindset is a huge asset. When there was a guy in a gym that I used to fight in and train in, and he wasn't a good fighter. I mean, not just on the bags or the whatever. He wasn't a great technique-wise fighter, but you couldn't convince him of that. In his mind, he thought he was a good fighter, and so everybody took him serious because he's like, shit, this guy won't stop. I mean, and he's tough, and he takes a punch, and he'll give 2 punches, and he'll take one to give 2. I mean, and so in his mind, you know, fatigue makes cowards of men was a sign over that sign, you know. So you want that stamina to be able to be a good fighter. You could be a good technical fighter, but we need our stamina back in this country. We need our spiritual stamina. Fatigue makes cowards of men. So we're spiritually fatigued. We're emotionally fatigued. We're mentally fatigued. And then when that happens, then the stupid ideas come in, and the deception comes in, and then it takes hold, because if a lie goes unchecked, it becomes the truth. And when a child's young, they don't know. Proverbs 22:6 says, start a child off in the way they will go, and they will get out. When they get older, they will not depart from it. Well, that starts on the antithetical side too. You start a child up under deception, they're not going to depart from it. And you get to a point, this Marxist ideology, they really are at a goal to where you tell someone the sky is blue. No, it's not, and I'm prepared to die for the fact that it's not blue. It's a delusion. And that's where we're going with our kids, because you see the level of disrespect. You see I don't know how many videos I've seen where kids are assaulting teachers.
I know.
And they're assaulting law enforcement. Look, law enforcement is not perfect. The institution is good. Not every individual is good. And they need more training. We need accountability. I was always for the body cams. When I was DA, that's when they were first rolling out. I was all for them. I thought it would bring truth to both sides. It would protect the officer and protect the citizen. Both. Let the video speak for itself. But aside from that, the level of disrespect for authority, for order, for common courtesy, for your neighbor is insane. And you've never seen it, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and we, we mentioned on R-rated, I think the question came up about whether civil war is inevitable, because a lot of people talk in those terms. No, I don't think civil war is inevitable at all. We have lots of political tools at our disposal that we need to leverage. But everybody plays a responsibility. If you're listening today and you're following along, you guys have each and every one of you has a network of people. And man, I'm telling you, that's where the change happens. I mean, you guys have an enormous amount of power. You really do. And it begins by arming yourself with information and being able to articulate and practice that. And if you're a believer, if you're a person of faith, you ought to be praying for God's help, really, that he would place you in situations where you get to use that, and that he would give you guidance on how to better prepare. But I think that's where the answer is. It's not in political figures.
The answer is in the people.
That's it.
It's your people and your mindset, of the people, by the people, for the people.
Nico, one thing, Patty said that she's surprised UTSA even let you in, because she tried to go see Dinesh D'Souza on Tuesday, sponsored by Turning Point USA, got there, and the rules changed. Even if you RSVP, the new rules said only UTSA students, faculty, and alumni. She said, can you believe it? The volunteers were students of UTSA, and they just closed the door on people to say, no, you can't come in.
Well, yeah, I went to an individual class. I didn't address the student body, or it wasn't some open event. It was an individual teacher, professor invited me to go speak to their political science class or whatever it was, criminal justice class. So that's why it was very appropriate for me to do that. Yeah, I don't know how it would have been. That's unfortunate, but there needs to be pushback on that. There needs to be pushback. People need to complain. Students need to complain. Parents need to complain. It's a public school. Sorry, allergies. But there needs to be pushback. When you're silent, when the squeaky wheel gets the grease, I mean, we've lost so much ground. We didn't lose it overnight. It started with a group of people that made noise. And then they got pushy, and they got this. We need to be appropriately pushy, always appropriate. We need to be appropriately pushy. We need to work within the confines of our structure and order, and we need to push back.
But strategize. Have something to say. Don't just make noise. Yeah,
100%.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't just make noise to make yourself feel good, because then you're like a clanging.
Inform yourselves. Yeah, inform yourselves and practice. Play some what if games. If I'm asked this question, what am I going to say back? Look, we live in gotcha world today. So we all ought to be experts by now. right? Anybody who reads a newspaper, for goodness sakes. Did I just say newspaper? I can't believe I just said that. That kind of dates me.
Right.
Anybody who reads any news anywhere, let's put it that way. A newspaper. My goodness. Can we edit that out? I mean, this is gotcha world. So we all have some experience in gotcha questions. Play some what if games and then organize. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Each of you has a network. Why not organize around that network?
We need to start expanding the network. We need to start fighting for hearts and minds, and then that's going to make a difference. And we can't give up. I mean, we got it. We didn't get here overnight. We're not gonna gain it back overnight. But we've got to be reasonable, logical, courageous about it, and do it. And look, that starts at home. It starts in your church if you're a person of faith. It starts in your conversations. It starts with your friends. It starts with arming yourselves with knowledge, wisdom, strategy, and being wise, and how to relay your message. And don't be a jerk off. Just be able to handle the truth properly. It's 2 Timothy 2:15 for me. But I think we need to wrap it up. We've been 40 minutes.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, which one is it? Over here. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us always at the after show. We hope you enjoy these conversations. Hope it helps you to critically think and give you some ideas on what you can do. Look, it starts with one person at a time. You be that one person. Maybe get someone next to you. Encourage it. Get your children, your grandchildren, obviously. And if you're a prayerful person, obviously pray and get involved and vote at some point. Right? God bless you. Have a great week.